to let you know.
And you're all massage therapists? That's very cool.
Minus me.
Minus you? Okay. I'm Cindy.
Yes, Cindy, nice to meet you.
I'm Jean.
Hey, I'm Barbara.
I'm Laura.
All right,
I'm the
Matt.
co-owners and the massage therapist as well.
Okay.
I'm Dawn.
Tammy.
Anna.
Hi, I'm in the front.
You're in the front. And you're getting a work perk, huh?
This is
Okay.
her-
Been in a brace for a month, so we just try and get her out of the brace.
Nice.
So while we're here, all sitting down.
There you
Let's see
go,
if we can work
there you
on
go.
it.
Well, I'll try not to have my back to you, and there's not like really exciting things on the slide, except there is a, video that I wanna show you guys, but, and I think mainly because, other than working next door to some, place that has, people with brain injury, one of our biggest challenges is that nobody knows what aphasia is. We're not usually the first word, and most people will say it's I think it's a skin disease, you know. Meanwhile, it's, you know, gonna be in 2020, there will be 2 million Americans with aphasia. There are 1 out of every 8 strokes will have aphasia. The word is what people don't really understand. Aphasia is a lack of language, or the absence of language. So when you're communicating with somebody who has challenges communicating back to you, what do you first start to think? If you talk to them and they're not responding,
Deaf.
they're deaf. So the first thing that people with aphasia will say is, "I'm not deaf, stop screaming at me." But the automatic kind of thing is, they're not talking back, let me say it louder. Then your second kind of assumption, which is also wrong, is, oh, they're stupid. Yeah, they're not very smart, or, you know, they have intellectual challenges, so I need to talk to them like they're a child, talk down to them, or assume that they don't know what's going on. And the problem is that that's really what frustrates most people that have aphasia, is that they know everything that they knew before their stroke. It does not affect intellect, it does not affect memory, although you'll hear your clients or people with aphasia say, I don't know, or I can't, I don't remember. It has nothing to do with memory or intellect, so it can't be those things. It's really more like if you were to all of a sudden go to a foreign country. So you all of a sudden show up in, you know, Malaysia, and you don't speak the language, okay? That's what it's like. You were the same brightness level that as you got on the plane. You might be a little fatigued, but otherwise you know. And everything all of a sudden isn't about your vowels and about, you know, like I have to go to the bathroom, or I have to, you know, but like that's not what it's about. It's about you're having the same thoughts as you had before. So this is why people with aphasia are so frustrated, because it's like the language they knew all growing up, that this letter D sounds like D and it is in the word dog, is, what is that? I know it like that, you know? It's really hard to think about or explain unless you think of that foreign language example, because it affects reading, writing, listening, and speaking, because those are the 4 areas of language. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more, because I think that the one thing that this opportunity allows me, which I really appreciate, is that when you communicate with somebody with aphasia, that you're going to know how to communicate with them best. And so I'm going to save kind of, 10 minutes for that. But I also want to talk to you about TAP. And I actually have some ideas about helping not just our TAP clients, but our caregivers get hooked up into massage therapy and other stress coping management techniques, because we're doing some research right now at TAP, and we're finding that by leaps and bounds, our caregivers experience more depression, higher depression rates, more frustration, stress, and comorbidities than our clients are having, because they're caregivers, and they're caregivers to an invisible disorder. So they take on the role now all of a sudden of these like responsibilities that people who have you know, MS or, other Parkinson's, and they're not having the same level of challenge or need from the caregiver. So an opportunity for me to talk to you about TAP is to tell you, you know, why we're even here. So I'm a speech pathologist. I've been for, I haven't colored my hair lately, so I have to be honest, 27 years. And I worked all along the continuum of care, from inpatient, acute care, all the way through to outpatient, rehab, community-based programs. And since I went into the field when you could see somebody for a really, really, really long time, then the insurance started going shh, 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 shh. Meanwhile, our knowledge of neuroplasticity started going shh, 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 shh. And then we're having this, you know, challenge of how do we serve people with aphasia, which will tend to be a chronic condition, or at least a long-term thing that they have to deal with, while you're cutting speech therapy down to 8 sessions. You know, the priority in the hospital is get them walking and getting eating and taking care of themselves, going to the bathroom, brushing their teeth. It is not let them allow them to communicate. That it doesn't even matter. Someone can be discharged without one sound, one communication device, anything, as long as they can walk or, you know, ambulate in some way, motor, and take care of their basic needs. So I really felt like a struggle of, we need to do something for people with aphasia that provides services long beyond when individual therapy covers it. Plus, we need to allow other people to know that it's a disorder that there are many, many people with in this community. Right now, or at least in our in the latest research that was done, 94% of people with aphasia consider themselves socially isolated. Not getting out back into work. 70% never return to work or any vocational, avocational volunteer jobs. People were not returning to social activities because some people say, well, I can't use my right hand, or I can't use my, you know, I can't walk, so I can't go do this. But think about, I can't communicate. If you have difficulty exchanging information with somebody, it affects any job or any volunteer or any social activity that you're doing. So TAP was started, and I'm gonna go into this, I guess I should kind of go on this a little bit more in the next slide, but I really love the opportunity for me to tell you about TAP and about aphasia, but I don't have aphasia. But my friend Lynn does, and I'm gonna have her tell you about what it's like to have aphasia. I hate when this happens.
What are you looking for?
It has to do with that being on that screen and not there.
You might
There it is. That one.
do on your
Like presentation mode or something like that.
I'll do what I know.
Okay.
Go to the screen for a second. Tell it to duplicate the screens. Oops.
Oh, I think that thing that you're on.
Alright, cool. Did you see it? I keep hitting the wrong button. I'm looking for display settings. And it'll
There it is,
say
yeah.
instead of extending,
Show on.
duplicate. And then it should be able to pull up whatever it is that you're trying to do.
You're the bomb.
Hopefully.
You have to come to every presentation. This always happens.
Duplicate screen currently. No.
So,
Alright, now we have to get volume up. I figured this one out the other day. We always have volume down on there. So it's not
fine,
you,
I
it's
just
me.
turned it off. Technical challenges. Okay.
Oh, did you turn off the computer?
Yeah, I went to turn the volume up and I
It's
pushed
too
it
loud,
on.
just, would you lower this?
Oh, there it is.
Well, while you're doing that, I can tell you, I don't know how much we're gonna collect money-wise, but we have a program called Drop In and Discover, where for the first year, we did them all for free.
Mm-hmm.
This year, we're doing it by donation, so for people who sign up to show up, they'll pay ahead, and, you're one of the groups that we're gonna donate to. Whether that's a $10 check that comes to you,
That's
or
all
whatever
right.
number of checks.
Believe me, every little bit helps.
We figure we'll get more commitment that way. Maybe a few more people will either come or at least not tell us they're coming and not come. So
Oh, this is-
it'll be a good talking point for everybody to hear about your group too.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Can you tell me what it's like to have aphasia?
Aphasia is crappy, one thing. Grasping for the words and think the thoughts and finally get the thought and then convey I thought the thought and have out of my mouth really tough, and I'm fine with some comparison, some people. I'm what is they, but so many people have so much better than I had.
What's been the hardest part?
I think it's not the things or the thing this cannot throw out any wine letters. I think something, because, I sing, wait, sorry. I haven't thought of it, say something with somebody is, I can't let out, and Nikki said, my daughter says, by the time I'll get it out, she'll get it. It's, no one side of it at all.
Takes a long
Do you
time.
get that?
Takes a long time to get it out?
It can't, wine one liner. No,
No one-liners.
well, that's a thing.
How has TAP helped you?
Oh gosh, so many times. I thought I'd be, just check it out. And I'm glad with this because I can, practice with thoughts, convey in words. How can I talk with people, some people like me, and it's nice thing is I don't feel self-confident, self-conscious.
Yep.
Conscious? That when outside in public, when I confine of the TAP, we have that, and confidence, I think, maybe. I know the people really patient with me so much, oh gosh. But still, it's nice they're here, so it's nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the favorite things I like about that video and showing it when I'm telling people about or teaching people about aphasia is that the person that's talking to her is a speech pathologist with 20 years of experience. And yet she does the one thing that we're not supposed to do in that video when she says, it takes a long time. She basically guessed. She was running out of I don't know what you're saying. And so instead of, relying on some of these communication supports that I'm going to teach you, we all get a little panicked. We all get that, not even a panic, a uncomfortableness of you're having trouble, I don't know how to help you, I want to instantly even out the playing field, so I'm going to guess and hope you're right. And most people with aphasia will just let you go. And they'll be like, yeah, it's fine, whatever you were going to say. And it's really doing such a disservice to the interaction, because we're basically saying, I can't figure out how to talk to you, you can't figure, but there's a giant elephant in the room. You have aphasia. Just admit you have aphasia. This is, this is some of the things. So one of the basic things I'm going to teach you is to always restate where you're at. This is what I heard so far. This is what you've communicated. You were telling me this, and you write it on a pad, which I'm going to show you how to do, which is basically just the same communication supports as a walker or a wheelchair is to movement. Is just giving them some support. So I love that one because it's like, yeah, we all do it, don't worry. All right, so I think it's really important to understand as I started to tell you about kind of where TAP came from, because it's where we and why we have grown in a way you only hear about when you watch Field of Dreams, when you say, if you build it, they will come, and holy crap, they came, and they came, and they came, and they came. And it's really because before TAP, before a program in the community, it was go along your standard continuum of care, your inpatient, physical, occupational, and speech therapy, start to go down to 3 times a week in outpatient, and go down to 2 times a week, and then go down to 1 time a week, and then boop, I hope you can swim. And there was nothing else until they went back to their doctor and begged them to go back for more speech therapy, which really was not setting up a system of success for anybody. What I love about my job is that we are able to work in collaboration with all of the speech pathologists, with their people with aphasia, so they never get that feeling of having to dump somebody or discharge them when they're not happy, because if you do surveys on most clients, they'll say they aren't happy about being discharged. You're never going to get a good satisfaction survey. But actually the surveys have been more positive because they have somewhere to go. They have something to collect. I think when we first started in 2003, probably through 2007, when we went for a brief time at Wake Med, which is why we were reborn in 2009, we were definitely used as that, well, there's nothing else, let's send them to TAP. And that wasn't really our mission either, wasn't to provide that farm, there's nothing else for you, so you can go to TAP. We wanted some type of collaborative relationship where people would be referred early on in their rehabilitation so that they had support all along. And then when they were being slowly let go back into the real world, they already had a platform. They already had people that they knew and a collaboration, which is awesome. This all was built on something that physical therapy and occupational therapy has been doing a long, long time, which is life participation. TAP is really good, or speech therapy is really good at helping you swallow again, helping you, talk, say some words, maybe write, or start to read again. What we're not so good at is tying that into the person's world. So this movement, which came just in the last 10 years, has been kind of an obvious, almost like, hello, speech therapist, maybe you should find out what their life is like and what they're going to go back to so that you can address their needs. And in your field, it would be silly for you to start working with somebody, if you didn't know what their goals were. If I came into you and I said, I have a horrible hip, I have a little bone spur and I have, arthritis, and then somebody else came in, same age, same, situation, said, I have the same thing, were we gonna have the same treatment plan? Probably not. I may want to go running again. Someone else might be a skier. These are all different type things that you guys need to know, and we're finally jumping on board with it. And then our values are those of hope, purpose, determination, and engagement. This is the life participation approach that we talked about. It was 2001 is when it was originally written, and it was a group of aphasiologists who said we got to do more than just provide people with compensatory strategies for dealing with aphasia. We have to help them get back into the things that they're doing. So all goals should be related to the person's life. This also fits into the World Health Organization and what they're saying, which is it shouldn't be just on impairment based. It should be based on participation, coping, somebody's life situation, and what they're going to be able to go back to. So we felt really supported because things in the medical community were also heading towards this more social model, which I always felt in my field, it just in my heart was the right thing to do. So it became, I always put this slide and then think, you know what, the very first thing that we would see on a chart was not all of these things like, you know, date of birth and type of injury and stuff. We would see type of insurance first, then everything else. But this is what a typical speech pathologist or any therapist would see in a hospital setting or in a rehab setting. Which then, looking at that person, you could make all kinds of assumptions about who they are based on that little knowledge. The life participation approach took that same person and put a face with a name kind of thing. Is you know, what is their life like? What were they involved in before they had their stroke? You know, get away from the tube stuck up the nose, the hair being like out of control, and you know, look at what their hobbies are, what are their passions, and start making your goals that are related to that. And so that's what TAP does, is we really make this life participation approach by getting to know the clients and getting to know their families and what they need. This, by the way, is my mom, who in 2009, in my last group at Wake Med, so I told you we took a little hiatus. We actually were TAP, but we were TAP at Wake Med from 2007 to 2009. It was an attempt to finally get me a salary because I've been volunteering for TAP up until last year, since 2003. So I think my husband was ready to say, see ya. It was my last group. We decided we can't work in a hospital because we're not out in the community. Plus we were, as you guys will appreciate, we were so connected with Wake Med that we lost all of our referrals from UNC,
Yes.
Duke, Rex, and everybody else. So we had to say, hey, we're community based, we need to go back out. And that's when we went back out as TAP Unlimited, which I'll explain in a minute. But on my way home from my very last group, I couldn't reach my mom, and she was having a large left hemorrhagic stroke, and has aphasia and right hemiparesis. So I think that the other switch in philosophy really was from that of let's train like we do with kids, you know, speech therapy that was in a little closet and was very worksheet oriented, to, you know, let's teach the person about what this disorder is. Let's give them the power to engage and decide what they want to do. So we started moving towards a more ownership model and teaching philosophy. This shows my age. If anyone's up here, you'll know what that movie is. It's the only time I was ever in a movie theater that I heard my dad laugh so loud. And of course, at that old black and white movie, Frankenstein. Anyway, we went from that to really from a very neuroanatomy type thing where you're saying, oh, well, the damage is here, so they will have this. You know, people were saying things like they are globally aphasic. Okay, globally aphasic is, besides an insurance murder, you're murdering any chance of them ever getting coverage again. But also it's just saying they have severe problems in reading, writing, listening, and speaking, instead of really finding out what they're good at, because every person with aphasia has reserved skills, right? So you have somebody come in that has a lot of issues physically that you have to work on, but you use their strengths to help their weaknesses, and that's what we needed to do too. And so in the lab, we were learning about neuroplasticity. We were learning the science behind it, about what it takes, what are the principles to change the structure of a neuron chain. So while we have a damage to this part of the brain, we just have to work around it. We don't even use 90% of our brain, so we might as well form some new pathways. You know, the bottom line is now we know what the principles are. We know you will use it or you will lose it. And you do that quickly. I will tell you that watching my mom, I mean, has been such an incredible learning experience. I hate that this happened to her. But I have to say, I have a different perspective on every single aspect of both the science of it and the motivation behind getting better. Because when she lost use of the right side of her body and she wanted a glass of water, even though she could, it was weak, but she could have gotten that glass of water with that right hand. This left hand just took over so fast. It was like, oh, you're not needed here, you're damaged, I'm gonna move over here. And just like that, these pathways switched. So we're kind of fighting a battle that the brain is trying to win. So the brain's trying to take the, you know, path of least resistance, you know, the easiest way. And we're going, nope, it's a struggle, it's effortful, but you can do it. We know that if that practice starts to happen, no matter how much, what do I always call it? It's laborious, you know, how much effort it takes to get your hand out to pick up with that side. It's worth every bit of it because you're basically setting up those little neurons firing. And then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, and next thing you don't need the other arm to do it. A perfect example and a really good descriptor for patients when you're talking to them about this is when you go to the beach, and I had my poor son do this. He was like, I'm never helping you again with anything. We made a sandcastle, and we had like a moat coming from it, you know, like, I don't know, we dug some, like a ditch, and we were gonna fill it with water so that alligators or whatever could go in there. And I gave him a pail, and I said, okay, now run down to the ocean and bring me back up some water. And he pours the water in, and what happens to the water? It disappears from vision, but is it still there? Absolutely, it sinks in, okay? If you stop putting the water in there and going, oh, this is tiring, I did this 3 times, I'm so done with this, you know, which is what he did, you're never gonna see that little bit of water form there, because eventually it will get saturated enough that you will start to see that. But in the beginning, it's all stuff that happens behind closed doors. So it's a really good analogy to use with patients when you're saying, I know this is hard, but every time you do it, so you see a client from over at Steps, and they say one word. They say, I'm cold, and you go, oh, you're cold, let me turn up the heat. That's your automatic, right? If you can say instead, that was great, you communicated that you were cold by giving me one word. But you know, we don't talk in single words. And I know you can do it. Can you give me a whole sentence? And then say, and help them. I am cold. They say, I am cold. That goes doop, 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 and that fire. Otherwise, you're not teaching the brain what you want it to do. So I always tell, you know, and I share many of these same clients over at TAP too, but what I'll say is that you teach the brain what you want it to do. So if you're always saying single words, you're only going to be able to say single words. If you never try writing, you will never be able to write. So there's lots of great books and information on this. The Brain That Changes Itself is a really great book on neuroplasticity. These are the 10 principles that I was talking about. We talked about use it or lose it, use it and improve it. Things like it has to be hard. It's not meant to be easy. Intensity, repetition. My son goes out to play basketball, and you know, he stays out there until he does this shot. He's trying to teach himself. He was first shooting like this, and the coach told him he really needs to have his arm out. It will give him a deeper shot. And so now he's doing this. Well, every time his arm wants to go back like this, because it's muscle memory, right? It's trained to go back here. Well, he has to do that over and over because I feel like it's starting to come automatically. I'm like, that's neuroplasticity. But that's not all that goes into neuroplasticity. And one book, I don't know if I have it on here, I don't, is a book that, and I'll get you the reference for it. I'll send you this PowerPoint over too, but there's a book from Dr. Helmstetter or something like that. And it's called something about neuroplasticity. I think it's the power of neuroplasticity. And what that is about is more of those motivational aspects, the envisioning of it, the self-talk. The other day when my son went to play in his basketball tournament, he's like this big, and the poor kid is like gonna enter high school next year and go but all the guys were this big. I mean, all the other team was this big. And he goes, "We're gonna lose." And you know, I said to him, I go, "You're right." And he said, why'd you say that? You always say positive. I go, because you've told yourself that. If we have a rule at TAP, you are not able to say the word CAN''T in our building. Because if you say that, your brain says, oh, that's it. That's it. It's all self-talk. You've heard these, podcasts before that talk about, saying, I am a successful, business owner. I have a brand new car. I have a very successful relationship. And that's all telling the brain to do it. So that is a really great book to kind of tell you the other stuff. And I think that as massage therapists, you guys would really appreciate that book too. So I'll send that along. So how does TAP do all this? Basically, we talk about engagement. It's anything where communication is a part of is better therapy than me and you sitting in a room going, what's this? What's this? What's this? Read this sentence, say this. Because you've got to think of carryover. You got to think of, is there generalization to the person's real world? They work on all of these things in occupational therapy, for example, moving your hand to put something in, all related to, or like if you were putting something in your hand, right? I remember my mom talk about the neuroplastic principles. One of them is saliency. Remember when my mom was first in therapy, she was in occupational therapy. I went downstairs, saw her in the therapy, she's sound asleep, drool coming out. They go, I go, Mom, what's going on? They go, oh, we're gonna take her back. She's not participating. She can't tolerate therapy. And in my head, I'm going, oh my God, I've been in rehab for 25 years. I know what's going to happen here. They're going to say she fell asleep. She can't tolerate 3 hours of therapy. And guess where her butt's going? Discharge. Because you have to be able to tolerate 3 hours. So knowing that, I jumped in and go, well, wait a minute. My mom, come on, got the cold rag, washed her face. Then I realized you're putting nails and screws in a little medicine cup. My mom has never touched a nail or a screw in her entire life. My dad was a serviceman, so he basically took care of all of that. So I said to them, I'm like, really, this has no meaning for my mom. This has no interest. But my mom was raised very Catholic, and I mean very, very Catholic. I said, so she would be generally saying the rosary right now. She'd probably say it twice a day, given the opportunity. I said, if you want her fingers to move, why don't you try that?